U.S. workforce gained 266,000 workers last month, that number being far below economists' April forecast that projected over 1 million jobs to be added in April.
Professor of Economics and co-founder of Democracy at Work, Professor Richard Wolff joins us now to discuss. Great to see you, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
All right, so this is what they call a gigantic miss. One of the largest divergences between expectations and reality that we've had in decades. What did you make of these numbers?
Everything that's happening to this country at this point is either a huge miss or a miscalculation or a surprise or a shock. Partly we should understand we are still in the stages of one of the worst catastrophes, both in our economy and in our public health system, and at the same time. This is not going to be an easy exit because it's a really serious problem. We got into this craziness about the recovery in which hype after hype told us we were out of the woods, which we all want to be, and it was upward and onward for here. This is not the reality. It's not going to be the reality. People should understand a little bit better that the problems we have are not an easy fix. Let me give one concrete example. We were told yesterday that the inflation rate year over year from last April to this April was over 4%. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an enormous increase in the cost of everything. And it's going to make the American people buy fewer things because they can't afford to pay those higher prices. And if fewer things are bought, fewer people are going to be hired to produce what can't be sold. So you can see right away the headwinds that are part of the story, why there was this serious miss.
And so one of the things that a lot of people discuss, Professor, is they said that there's too much unemployment, which is creating a labor shortage. What do you make of that argument?
Well, that is junk. I mean, I don't know how to be polite about this. Corporations want people to come back to work at low wages. They want to be able to raise prices, which they're doing, but they don't want to pay higher wages. Why not? Because that makes more profits. If you can raise the price, but you don't have to pay your workers more, there's extra in it for you. And you can't say that because it's ugly and obvious. So you talk about a labor shortage. Well, we teach in economics what all these businessmen and women know. If there's not enough workers and you want to hire more, there's a really easy way to do that. Raise the wages, and then the people will come. Let's remember, the American working class suffered badly over the last 14 months. Lost jobs, lost incomes, used up savings, the extra costs of getting COVID or sickness, et cetera, et cetera. So they need the help that rising wages could give them. And if the business community understood or cared, they wouldn't be suggesting a labor shortage as a none too subtle way to try to get the government to force people back to work without paying higher wages. And the threat to take away the extra unemployment is the coercive mechanism aimed at getting that result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all sticks. It's never any carrots to get people back into the workforce. Professor, I'm interested to hear more about your views on the inflation numbers that just came out. Some of the analysis suggested, look, this is where we would have been if we didn't have a big hit last year. Other analysis has suggested essentially this is confined to a few different sectors. This is just a sign of things getting back online and the road being a little bit rocky. What do you think is the significance of these numbers, and where do you think this inflation is originating from?
I think there are several causes. All inflations have multiple causes. They're never reducible to one thing. Here, I think if I had to focus on something, I would talk about the attempt by the business community to recoup its losses over the last 14 months, all of those associated with workplace closings and fewer shoppings and all the rest of it. And they want to catch up. They want to make good. And so they're going to raise their prices in the hopes that it will stick. The problem is really that the government can't cope with that. The Federal Reserve policies have been premised on the notion that there wouldn't be a rapid inflation. And we're all clear that in the past, the Federal Reserve has not been able to control inflations in an effective way early on. And so there's great anxiety now that this inflation will not be a blip, will not be temporary, will not be over by September, the way some Fed officials have already suggested. It may, because particularly the American working class can't support higher prices, and that may be the discipline that stops them from rising further. But for this moment, we have a lot of impetus. Oil prices are going up. Lots of input prices are going up. That's pushing employers to feel it's a time they can maybe get away with it, and they're going to try to do it. It's socially irresponsible because it makes our economic situation even more tenuous, but it is something to watch very carefully because it is not under control, no matter what officials suggest otherwise.
Yeah.
One last question for you, Professor. Do you think there's a sort of fundamental rethinking by workers of their relationship to employment? There's some signs of shifting industries, going back to school to get different credentials to go into different lines of work. You can see among the sort of professional managerial class, they like their Zoom workplaces, they're cutting back on hours, they're moving to other places where they feel like a work-life balance may be more in line with what they ultimately want. Do you see a sort of like cultural shift going on right now?
Absolutely. And again, it has multiple causes and is taking multiple directions. You see a resurgence of interest in labor unions. It's remarkable how many workers are beginning, even Republican workers, to think about the union as a protection for their own situation. You see a great deal of distrust of the government on the right and the left, and the distrust of the business community as being no longer the kind of unifying or unified force. I think if I had to give an answer, I would say that U.S. capitalism as a system is in very deep difficulty. That's why we didn't react well to the COVID. You know, we are 4% of the world's population, 20% of the world's COVID deaths. For a rich country with a well-developed medical system, this is a disastrous performance. You know, we can't sustain the war in Afghanistan anymore. The signs of a system in trouble are accumulating, and individuals in this country, particularly working people, know something is going, wrong, and they don't know quite where to go with it. But I think you're beginning to get the accumulated disorientation that's going to mark the period ahead.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you for joining us, sir. Appreciate it.
Great to see you, sir.
Thank you.
More Rising for you after this.